Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's Living with Parkinson's Meetup. I'm Chris Krueger, Senior Manager for Content with the Davis Phinney Foundation, and I'm really glad to be here. And thanks for joining us, everybody. In this series, our Living with Parkinson's Meetup series, we gather a panel of people with Parkinson's to share parts of their lives living with Parkinson's, and we sort of talk about whatever the subject of the day calls to talk about. And today's topic is going to be laughter and Parkinson's. And I think we can jump in to the topic in a few moments, but before we do that, you might notice we have a couple guests on the screen, and I just want to invite Lloyd Taylor to introduce himself, and then I'll ask Amy after Lloyd goes and says hello, if you can go ahead and just say hello to Amy after that. So Lloyd, tell us about where you're calling in from, a little bit of your story.
Yeah, I'd like to start by saying, hi everyone, I'm Lloyd Taylor, and I'm not waving at you. I have Parkinson's. See, that started well, didn't it? We're laughing already. Like many of us, I was diagnosed with a misdiagnosis back in 2019. I was twice told the phrase, be thankful, Lloyd, you don't have Parkinson's. And then the third time I tried to get into the club, I was finally admitted and told, well, indeed, you do have it. My first act was to try and cure frozen gait by running with the bulls in Pamplona, which I can tell you does cure frozen gait, but only temporarily. Since then, I've written a best-selling book, and I've ridden through the Arctic on a bicycle, and I am the co-chair of the Spinning Wheels Tour, which is a coast-to-coast bicycle tour to raise awareness of Parkinson's.
Great. Thanks, Lloyd. Thanks for being here, and thanks for saying hello to everybody. And Amy, tell us a little bit about your background, what your story is.
Hi, I'm 14 years post-diagnosis with young onset Parkinson's disease. I'm currently 58 years old, and I just returned from a cruise we started in Amsterdam. We ended up in Budapest, which is the picture behind me. That was from our ship, and it was really wonderful, and I could still do it. So yay ha for me. In fact, I even rode bikes. Once they told me it was e-bike, and it was not an e-bike, and I still did it. And then the second time was with an e-bike, and that was a lot more comfortable. But I did not drink the beers along the way. I decided to, do it more of a sober thing. But still out there kicking. So there you go.
Yeah, and thanks for joining us again, Amy. I know you've been a part of this group at various times before, and I'm glad you were able to join us today as you're just getting back from your trip. So thanks for being here.
Sure.
So
it's not my fault.
Yeah, right. So today's topic was chosen and suggested by Larry. So I'm going to pass to Larry to introduce the topic and maybe share a little bit of what this means to you, why you wanted to talk about laughter today, and frankly, I think it's a good thing to talk about. And I'm glad you chose it. So thanks for stepping up to the plate. And what do you think, Larry? Tell us about why you thought this.
Well, thanks for that, Chris. Nice to see everybody again. I mean, from the start, I fully acknowledge that living with Parkinson's is no laughing matter. Being classified as the fastest growing neurodegenerative disease in the world doesn't scream comedy. But there's no question that I've had some comedic moments in my life with Parkinson's, and I've used those to counteract the seriousness of the topic. And today I thought we could take that hat off, the serious hat off, and talk about some of the lighter moments. And I'd like to share some of those with you. When I was first diagnosed, I had to write a small writing test that the doctor gave me a pad and pen. And when he handed me the script for my first medication, I looked at his handwriting and I asked him if he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's, because his handwriting was worse than mine. Over the years, I've also come up with my top 10 perks of Parkinson's, and I'll share some of them with you. My first is never having to buy an electric toothbrush again. And, there's some serious eye rolls to that. Also, all my glasses of milk turn into milkshakes. And my favorite being a drummer, practicing my drum rudiments, I can easily convert my single to a double roll with little difficulty. Um, Also, what I also used to do when I was working downtown in my corporate life was adopt John Cleese's Ministry of Funny Walks. I don't know if you've ever seen him in the Monty Python series. There's nothing quite serious about a guy in a suit in the financial district in downtown Toronto, marching on the spot or walking backwards or skipping with a briefcase down to another client's meeting. These are all the things that I've adopted throughout my journey to sustain me through my Parkinson's. I've met many wonderful people with senses of humor. I think we all possess that within us, but one particular person who you've just heard briefly about is Lloyd. I got to know Lloyd in Barcelona. We spent some time at the last Parkinson's Congress, and his wonderful sense of humor impressed me right from the start. And his book that he wrote about his journey comes alive with from every page with his wonderful sense of humor, not from his perspective, but also from the people that he met, and everybody that contributed to his book indeed have their own senses of humor as well. So I'd like to turn it back to Lloyd to just talk about more about his experience and how he's used his sense of humor to sustain him in his Parkinson's journey. Lloyd, over to you.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you everyone for having me on today. It's an honor to join the podcast. In some ways, I think there are things that we try and hold on to on this Parkinson's path, and there are things we let go of and changes we make. But I think innately who we are hopefully stays the same. Humor was always my approach to life. And it didn't seem to make any sense to let go of that when Parkinson's came along. So I think it's something that's been seamless for me, and it gets you through the tough times, it gets you through the good times. It's just a way of approaching the world. I can say, if I steal a line, I should have looked it up so I got it right, but my book has been nominated for the Stephen Leacock Award, which is an award for humor in Canadian writing. And Stephen Leacock was renowned for his humor writing and talked about the importance of humor in society, that it allowed us to approach difficult subjects. Talking about subjects of any kind can be difficult in the world, and we all have different opinions. And yet when you throw in a dose of humor, everything changes, and people can laugh together and come together on a topic. So I think it's at the heart of how we communicate. Which wasn't a very funny answer, by the way, Larry, but there's room for heartfelt answers as well, right?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll just put you on the spot and then I'll pass it over to Amy. But I want to put you on the spot, taking you back to Barcelona with one example. When you were looking at the book nook and you were flipping through some of the pages of some book. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, there was a book nook, as Larry indicates, displaying books about Parkinson's and a variety of different books. And there was one book that was a bit of a homemade affair, but it caught my eye and it was very interesting. And it had been put together in a 3-ring binder, and each page had been laminated. And I picked the book up and I began to flick through the pages, and I began to tremor. And of course the rings burst open and the laminated pages began to fly out of the folder, and they were scattered all over the floor. I ended up on my knees trying to pick them up, but they were slippery and they would slip away as I tried to grab them. And Larry either strolled along and helped me or kicked a few under a chair to make it more difficult. I'm not sure. But it was a highly embarrassing moment that humor helped with.
But fun.
And but funny, absolutely. And I'll tell a really quick anecdote from Barcelona as well, if I can. I mentioned running with the bulls, and if anybody's been to Pamplona for the running of the bulls, it's an enormous affair. It's sort of the Super Bowl of Pamplona, the Super Bowl of Spain. The streets are packed. The morning shows are there. Cameras everywhere. They close the street off, and the run is its own thing. I won't get into the details, but it's rather intense. And when the run ends, they open up the streets and medics pour in to remove the injured, and locals pour in to speak to the runners. And I was with my two sons, and these two young guys came up to us and were saying, asking us, what was it like? How close did you get to the bulls? What was it dangerous? And we answered all their questions. And then he looked at me, and I'm like this, and he said, "It must have been incredible, man. You're still shaking." I didn't bother to tell him it was Parkinson's. I just let him go with it.
Yeah, excellent. Great. Amy, can we turn it over to you?
Sure. Some of you may know that I sometimes get an opportunity to speak with the organization, The Moth. And so I have a talk that I do there all the time. I'm not going to do that talk today because a lot of you have heard it, or if you haven't heard it, maybe you'll run across it. So I'm going to do a different story today, which is, I think, very funny. And one of the things that I like to do is try different new drugs that come out for Parkinson's, because I'm always on the lookout for something that's going to be helpful. And so at one point I tried a drug called Inbrija, and it was when it was first coming out on the market. If you are not familiar with it, it's an inhaled form of carbidopa, or actually just levodopa. It's an inhaled form of L-Dopa. And I had never, it came in the mail, finally came, took a while to get on it and get on the prescription and all that stuff. And so I'd never really tried it. But we got the stuff in the mail right before we went up north to northern Wisconsin. And there, Stan has some Inbrija right there to show you what we were talking about. And we were going up north in northern Wisconsin, and what we normally do up there is water ski. Okay. And so I've been water skiing for years, even though every year I get painfully worse and worse and worse, this whole water skiing gig. And there's this thing that we used to, that I've been doing since I was 12. It's called a hop start. It's when you get up on one ski, hopping through the shallow water, and then finally stepping down onto the ski when you're going fast enough to able to just take off, right? Sounds easy, not so easy, and definitely not in my tool belt anymore with Parkinson's. And so I'm sitting there on the dock, my whole family's there, and I'm off. I'm totally off. And the whole thing about Inbrija is supposed to be a rescue inhaler. Like, you're off and you want to get a quick on state, you're supposed to use this thing. And my husband says to me, "Well, why don't you try the new stuff? You brought it." And I said, "Well," because my brother said, "Do you want to go water skiing?" And I said, "I can't, I'm off. Can't you, duh." I'm like sitting there going, not moving, not anything, worth water skiing. And my husband wanted to try the new drug. And I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to take the new drug and go water skiing. That would be a crazy thing to do." He's like, "No, I just meant because you're off, you could try the new drug." I'm like, "Oh, right." So we get the new drug out. Have I watched the video in the last 3 weeks? No, I watched it 2 months ago. I don't remember any of the details. Do I go back and read the directions? Heck no. I just, take it out and fumble my way through it. And one of the things I did is you're supposed to breathe it in slowly and steadily. Instead, I did it kind of like an asthma inhaler. I just went, and sucked it back as hard as I could, which means that you take this powder that's totally dry, as dry as you can imagine, and plaster it against the back of your throat, which, if anyone has an imagination, that would make you cough. It would make you cough a lot until you're close to throwing up and your eyes are watering and your nose is running. I just made a big, miserable mess of myself. But I got the best on I've ever had. I mean, instant, fabulous, wow, off the charts. I can do anything. I am Superwoman. And so I'm like, "Hey, I think I will go water skiing." And I walk over and I get my ski and I go to the shallow water. I have forgotten that I can't do a harp start anymore. Put on the ski, grab the rope, say to my brother, "Go." And my brother's nothing if not a risk taker. So he's all in, even though while everybody else is going, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Step off the ski, one hop, gone. Never fell, just stepped off. Started making cuts like I haven't made in 20 years. And I'm laughing and hooting and hollering. And my sister-in-law is filming this with her camera, her phone. And my husband's sitting next to her on the boat. and my brother's driving and they're laughing at me and they're saying, I don't know what you just took, but can I have some? I mean, this stuff, like, wow, I'm having what she's having, the old Harry Met Sally line. It was the best rush. It was so much fun. I never got that same sort of on state again from Ambrosia, but I think that was because I little overdid there, but it was the best day and it was so fun and it was great to see my family just laughing at the incredible time that I was having because they just thought it was funny and I think it's funny and I think it was a wonderful thing. So that's my happy
that's
story.
great. That's great. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And maybe we should go to Dr. Stan now for the commercial break because he was holding it up to the camera. Dr. Stan, could you talk about maybe the medical, talk about that a bit more if you want to, or anybody else who wants to jump in.
Well, I've used Ambrosia some. It is very good. It's it does. Amy's right. You got to be careful. It can make you cough, but it's an interesting idea where you can just inhale the medication. It gets to you very quickly, and it gets you out of your off period very quickly. So it's a nice thing.
Yeah, it can be a little complicated too, right? I mean, as for instance, if you take it, when it hits can be a little variable, as I understand, depending on multiple different factors, the same as any dose of levodopa. But I mean, I guess you have to be a little careful how you actually execute first of all, it's complicated, I think, to get the device together if you're off really bad, right? But besides that, you have to be careful as to how you breathe it in, I guess. So, or not, I guess, if you need to go water skiing.
Don't.
This may be an example of do as Amy says, not as Amy does.
Yeah, this is where I'm a horrible warning rather than a good example. But there you go.
This is why I had to sign a waiver yesterday, Chris, before coming on.
Yeah. So, I think we can open up to anybody else that has any other funny story to share. Somebody just put in the chat, I think Kelly put in the chat a story about having some sort of a thing of Miralax investigated at a security stop at the airport, and they thought it might have been cocaine, so they were testing it for that. Yeah. And I would have found that funny after the fact, but in the moment I would have been like, my tremor would have gone berserk. All my symptoms would have got worse just from the stress of that, But afterwards, that's hilarious.
That actually happened to my late husband, Rick, and I. So for those of you who don't know, my late husband, Rick, lived with Parkinson's for 13 years, and we were on a trip. Going on a trip somewhere, and he put his Miralax just in a baggie, in his check through, right? And of course it got flagged. And I mean, poor Rick at the time was also experiencing some cognitive challenges. So the security agent is like, "Sir, what is this?" And Rick's like looking at me, not like finding the words. And so I'm like, it's Miralax, and he got it. The security agent is sort of scolding him for, not keeping it in the original packaging. And, but you're right, Chris, like in the moment, I was like, oh shit, we're going to get pulled off to the, like side room, and the like police are going to come, and they waved us through, and like in the moment it was that like, oh crap moment, and then later a funny story to tell. But lesson learned, get the packets that are all labeled. Don't pour it off into a little baggie. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, the same thing can be true for your other medications too. I mean, I think it's important. Sometimes you get advice about keeping things in the original bottles, for example. It makes it a little easier. Maybe if they choose to stop and look at your pills for whatever reason. I don't know why they would, but I've gotten that advice for other times for other medication too.
Yeah, I see Polly and a couple other are laughing at my holy crap. That was not intended, but now I'm going to make sure to weave that into the Miralax story.
Yeah, that was artful right there. That's really yes. Don't pretend. We know that you did that. It was all a hand.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have a story?
I asked my wife what she thought was funny about Parkinson's, and because I couldn't come up with any story, and she said she'd told me a story about something that happened to us when my son was visiting. We were going to have a game night, and So because we do that occasionally, and he and I said, well, I'll go find a game. So I brought out that game where you stack chairs on top of each other, sort of like for balancing, little plastic chairs. I don't know if any of you seen that, but they both looked at me and said and laughed. What are you doing with Parkinson's? Bringing out of a game where you have to balance chairs and get as high as you can with the balanced chairs. And then I sort of showed them. I said, oh, and then they determined afterwards, oh, you were pretty good at that. And I think sometimes people don't really understand that when you're on, you can do pretty well, and when you're off, you can do pretty poorly. So if your medicines are just right and you pick the right time to play the game, you can manage pretty well. And which happened that night. So I surprised them and said that they said that'd be the last game they would expect me to pull out to play and try to beat them at.
Sounds like a brave game under any circumstances, Stan. Stacking chairs. That you've got a fun-loving family.
Yeah. We look for fun games.
Yeah.
I'm smiling because I'm looking at all of you and I'm thinking about laughter that I've had with all of you and how much this group and this organization has brought into my life in terms of laughter. Pretty much everyone I met here I've found a lot of laughter with. And like Stephanie, I remember, I will not put you on the spot in a bad way, but I remember playing around. We had a blonde and a brunette and a redhead, all with Parkinson's. And we were playing around with ChatGPT and we were talking about Charlie's Angels and to do a roast with Charlie's Angels about pedaling for Parkinson's, because I run a big charity event about stationary cycling. And the stories, we were like, make it harder, make it worse.
Oh, it was so fun.
More extreme. It was hilarious. And 3 like middle-aged women with Parkinson's trying not to pee their pants when they're laughing. Another thing. And I'd written poetry with Amy, and we've had a number of laughs there and been to leadership conferences, and Sri, we've been on here. But I'm thinking about my father. So my father had Parkinson's, and he developed dementia in the last 6 years of his life, and he was taking a lot of dopamine agonists. I think at the time it was Miralax. And he just, we didn't know what we knew then, but he ate a lot of ice cream. He had a lot of impulsivity related to the medications, and he loved ice cream. And he was in the hallway one day, and he was trying to put on some pants. And he was just like pulling him up. He was really struggling. He's just so frustrated. He's like, I'm eating way too much ice cream. And I looked at my father and I said, the reason you can't get those pants on, Dad, is they're mom's pants. So he was trying to put my mom's pants on, but we would hide the keys from him and he'd steal them. He hadn't driven in years, and he'd be walking down the hall jingling the keys. No idea how he found them. And I'd say, what are you doing, Dad? I don't think you're supposed to be driving. He said, I'll just be right back. I'm just going to the store, And he'd literally start walking out the door with the keys, thinking he was going to be able to go to the store. But maybe it's just how you choose to look at things. At the time, looking back, I remember my dad sitting in front of watching baseball in front of the screen, and he'd be like going like this, and he'd say, Dad, what are you doing? He's like, shh, I'm pitching, and I don't know. It's just making me laugh because I think of all the laughter that we've shared together as a group and with this community. It's not always funny, and at the risk of people maybe being offended by laughing at some of this stuff. But I know when I first got diagnosed, my husband and I were in a pretty bad mood. So we would watch Comedy Central every night. It didn't fix anything, but it gave us a break from perseverating about a future that we couldn't imagine. And so those are some of my funny experiences.
And wouldn't get it right if you did try to imagine it.
True.
Yeah.
Karen, your stories about your dad remind me of my dad. He is 82 now and has Parkinson's. And so he does a lot of really cute, funny things now that I think, now that I've settled into his Parkinson's, I'm not as worried or concerned. I still am, but he does some funny things. But actually, that's not my story. So I was desperately looking to find a note I had written down about something my niece, who was 7 or 8 at the time, said to me. about my Parkinson's, not knowing, she doesn't know that I have it. And she hasn't really noticed the shaking or anything until recently. And so I couldn't find that. And now I'm like, oh my God, did I delete that note? Because it was the most hilarious thing I've heard in a while. But I found another one. And in this one, it says, my niece saw my left hand, the pinky finger twitching, and my hand moving a bit, and said, your body always has to be doing something, doesn't it? Just like me. And I thought, oh, that's such a cute way of talking about my dyskinesia and my tremor. And I thought, it's not really funny, but it was sweet. And so being compared to an 8-year-old actually is not a bad way to go when you have dyskinesia and Parkinson's.
That reminds me of a story that I have. I had an experience with a friend of mine. I went into a soccer game in Washington, D.C. with my friend Jesse and his son. And I had been diagnosed not long before. And Jesse was a very, very important friend to me in a lot of parts of my life. And he knew I had just been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and he had told his son, and that was okay. I knew that was happening. And I'm parking the car in DC, and I didn't, it was uncomfortable, it was stressful, whatever, but I didn't have any symptoms that this child would have noticed. But later that night, Jesse texts me and he says, he tells me that his son, when they were praying before bed, he said that his son said, and please, dear God, help Chris with the parking disease. And I said him back, I didn't think I did a bad job parking. I thought I got us in a good spot. I don't know. It's really cute.
That is cute.
I was going to talk a minute about dark humor. I know some people mentioned it in the chat, and I can get into that. I think one of the first ones that I was talking with a friend of mine when we was first diagnosed, and he was first diagnosed as well. And we were in a workout group together, and he said, so I went out this weekend and I bought a car. And I'm like, really? And I'm like, that's cool. And he's like, yeah. He goes, I went and got the convertible because, who knows? Maybe this is it, And we were kind of laughing. And then a few years later, I went and bought a convertible. So I think there's a little bit of that serendipity that comes with the disease, and that, it's like it kind of lets you be a little bit free. I don't know if that's humorous or not. I think it's a gift, to say, you kind of face something and you say, well, let's not wait for tomorrow to have fun. On another note, with more dark humor or similar kind of aspect, is I went on a keto diet for a while to see how it would work with my Parkinson's, and the one I went on is the one that they use for people with epilepsy, especially children with epilepsy, because it helps reduce the incidence of seizures in epileptic kids. Very well studied. We don't know what it does in Parkinson's, but I decided to try it. And so I was eating this. It's an absurd diet, really, extremely absurd. You eat like all protein and fat. So one morning, my brother and my sister-in-law are excellent chefs, cooks, and they just make all kinds of fun stuff. So one morning, my sister-in-law made me an omelet with brie cheese in it, like, full fat, as far as fat producing as you can get. And my brother is like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be terrible for your heart. And I'm like, hey, you got to go some way. And I think a heart attack is going to be better than the Parky way, And we were kind of arguing about that, and it ended up being a very funny conversation. But in the end, actually, the keto diet reduced my cholesterol, which was really bizarre and strange. So that totally didn't work out about the whole thing of having heart disease because I ate keto. But I think there's those moments where you, oh my gosh, somebody just wrote, I thought this was about constipation. That's hilarious. No, humor and Parkinson's, not constipation.
Amy, can you follow the results through? I know it's off topic, but I'm considering going on a keto diet myself right now. I'd be interested in how long you pursued it and just what
I
the results were for you.
pursued it for like a year. I found it to be incredibly helpful for a lot of reasons. I don't want to go into all the details. It is impossible to continue forever. I would
Right.
suggest that it's something you try, you understand a little bit more about your body and how you use food, And one thing you will absolutely, I felt like I really learned is how incredibly horrible sugar is for someone with Parkinson's. The inflammation that it causes is absolutely amazing. For me, that was my experience, is that I now know how detrimental sugar is to me, and it let me learn that. I would never say it'll do the same thing for anybody else. I think it's, user, beware or whatever that is, but proceed with caution and all kinds of things. And definitely I will also say, I worked with my internist. We did blood work every 3 months while I was on the diet to make sure that nothing went wonky, because you can really screw yourself up when you go on a weird diet. And so I would say, if you want to try it, please do so with caution and with your doctor's influence.
Amy, just really quickly, I should let you know, and basically everybody else will find out too, that I ate 3 to 4 donuts yesterday. And so I will say that when I have gone off of sugar and made it an effort to like not even have sugar in my tea, like I'll be drinking Earl Grey tea without sugar, which is like heinous.
Yeah.
But it actually tastes a little bit better. I've gotten used to it, and I think my body works a lot better. But then I kind of detract and I eat these donuts, and then I'll wake up finding like my face filled with like glazed donut and sugary donut remains, and it's like, oh dear, I defaulted again. Oh my.
Yeah, the sugar cravings are real. I've not met a Parky yet who doesn't just like love candy absurdly more than most people love candy. And I will say that while I was on my cruise, I was not on the keto diet, and there was a lot of pastry. There was a lot of pastry.
I will say, like, I don't know if this is funny, but I find it amusing. But my mom knows my love of sugar. So she'll often have a couple of sweet things in the house, but she'll hide them from me. And I'm always hunting around to try and find that. And so with the Parkinson's, it makes it a little bit more tricky for me to grab things. And I think she uses that to her advantage, to hide sugary things from me, putting it all the way at the top, because
Cruel and unusual punishment.
very cruel and unusual punishment. I agree. But I managed to find them. I managed to find them every single time.
I think you're not just being compared to an 8-year-old. You're living the life of an 8-year-old. They're hiding candy from you. It's not right.
I get toast and tea brought to me every morning. It's great.
Oh, I would do that. Yeah, I think that diet, I see a lot of comments in the chat. Diet can make a big difference, and it can make you laugh, because like my friend Naomi loves Tootsie Roll Pops, and sometimes she'll have like 2, 1 in each hand. So, it's all fun and games. Yeah, so
I want to circle back to something that Karen said about the pants with your dad. Because it reminded me of a story with my late husband Rick. We were going to a meeting at the university, and he was walking in front of me going up the steps into the building, and I noticed that he was wearing my Calvin Klein jeans. And I said, honey, you're wearing my jeans. And he says, no, I'm not. I wore these yesterday. I said, yes, but they're still my jeans. And he's like, what? He's like, I wondered why the pockets were so short. Because like women's jeans have really short pockets, men's jeans have really deep pockets. So I tease him about that. Like, no, I'm not. I wore these yesterday. Yeah, but they're still my jeans. And then he did it again. And I'm like, honey. And then I thought, it's not fair that he fits in my jeans. Like, then I get kind of mad about that. Like, that's not fair. He fits in my jeans.
I think it's obvious you have a very slender husband.
I just thought of something that I deal with when living with my parents. And so I like to say that my parents and I live together versus the more basic that I live with my parents, because one sounds better than the other. But my mom is always putting the toilet seat down. And I know this is something that maybe many married couples go through. But I kept telling my mom, you need to keep the toilet seat up. You need to keep the toilet seat up. And she's like, That's just not good manners. It's not appropriate. I finally had to tell her, Mom, every second counts when you've got to go to the bathroom and you have Parkinson's disease. So that extra second that I've got to pull up the toilet seat means it's like life or pee everywhere. And so I just found that amusing that I had to get really like specific with her and say, this is why you need to keep the toilet seat up, because it makes a whole world of difference. So maybe that wasn't really funny, but it definitely was TMI. Sorry.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
I would say one of the other funny stories I have is when I was about maybe 5 years in, and I met a guy in Los Angeles who had Parkinson's, and we got to talking, and we ended up going out for lunch. He and his wife and my husband and I went out for lunch. And we went to Grand Central Market in LA, which if you've ever been there, is just no place for somebody with Parkinson's. It's just an absolute mad crush. And there's like 60 restaurants in this warehouse, and like it's just wall to wall people. It's no place for anybody who can't, really not only navigate through a crowd, but also beat them back, So he and I sat outside at a table, and our spouses went and got us food. And so we were chatting beforehand, and he had very advanced Parkinson's and was hard to hear. And I leaned forward to hear him, and he whispered in my ear, I just have to tell you one thing. And I said, what's that? And I'm waiting for this, incredibly dark, magic secret. And he says, you're going to experience a lot of shit, but don't worry. It's just the Parkinson's. I've used that line a million times since then, and it makes me laugh every time because it's like, don't worry. It's just the Parkinson's. And he said it with a big smile. He was great.
I don't know why I didn't remember this story again about my dad, but I have to share this one. So my dad was a big advocate. He did a lot with the Parkinson's Action Network, which actually was the political activism arm of what's now the Michael J. Fox Foundation. But at the time, it was a long time ago. And we went to a gala, and I'd never been to a gala. This just wasn't my scene. And it was Janet Reno and Muhammad Ali and Michael J. Fox were there. And I said, Michael J. Fox was like my, crush when I was in high school. So I said to my dad, I really want to meet him. I really want to meet him. So my dad was very dyskinetic, and he takes me up to meet Michael J. Fox. I'm super nervous. And my dad had his drink in his hand, and he was going all like this, and they're in their tuxedos. And all of a sudden he goes, whoop, and his white wine spills on Michael J. Fox's tuxedo. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And they look at each other with this like super straight face of mask and just kind of staring at each other. And I was like, oh no, here's the moment. Here's the moment. And they started laughing. They both started cracking up. And Michael J. Fox says, well, that's why you drink white wine at these events. So I just remembered that. And I don't know why I hadn't remembered that, but it was pretty funny. Oh, nice.
Oh, yes. That's a classic. Yeah.
It turned my background off so you could see it, but my husband bought that for me because I'm a fan also. Before and after the Parkinson's. So
that actually relates to something that came into us before the meetup, a question, this story about Michael J. Fox generally, and also the picture. I don't know that this person was sending this in as a funny story. I see a little bit of humor in it, so I'll just read what the person wrote. They wrote, this isn't really a question, but here are two things that I've been asked a lot. It's not a question for you, is what he meant. The person wrote and said, it's not a question for the panel, really, but here are two questions I'm asked a lot. And he says that the people ask him, can I catch Parkinson's from you? And then he'll explain the answer, and they turn away, and he sees like half the people that ask the question end up going somewhere to wash their hands, or they squirt hand sanitizer on their hands afterwards anyway. And, on the one hand, that you could look at that and say, well, that's kind of offensive in a way.
It's funny.
But it's also hilarious.
It's funny.
And then the other thing was, he says he also hears often that people say, so have you met Michael J. Fox? And, I think a surprising number of people in the Parkinson's community actually have met Michael J. Fox, but it's not to say that, certainly not everybody does that. It's not like we'd say, you don't get Parkinson's diagnosis and then all of a sudden you get to meet Davis Phinney and Michael J. Fox and Brian Grant and all these other people,
Well, of course,
It's
Larry.
amazing.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it is amazing how many people you do meet, though. And it is such a club and a tribe. But you're right. Everybody does ask me that. Have you met Michael J. Fox? Like, actually, no. I saw him speak once, and there were like 1,000 of us, but I haven't actually met him. So good on you, Karen.
I was determined to meet him. It took me about 2 years to finally get to a place where I knew he was talking and managed to meet him and shook his hand. And
Wait, this wasn't his living room, was it? You didn't go.
no, I didn't stalk him.
You weren't
Didn't stalk him that way.
But you have the Canadian connection, so you know.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I wrote about. But it was an amazing. I mean, I saw him in Back to the Future, and I've written about this and spoken about it. I mean, I modeled myself on him from the early days, years before his Parkinson's. But with that Parkinson's, it sort of became a natural calling for me to try and meet him, and I did finally meet him, and it was really quite amazing to have the opportunity. He just felt, normal. There wasn't the pretense of Hollywood. He was just a guy who took an interest in me within 30 seconds and asked, are you exercising? You look good. How long you've had it for? And then you hustled out the room. But really, it was a culmination of years of corresponding and seeing him on the big stage. To finally meet him was awe-inspiring for me.
And his books are wonderful. They're funny.
Yeah.
I mean, they really are. Most of them are very funny as well as very illuminating. So sorry, I cut somebody else off.
No, I was just going to say, I appreciate you mentioning, Amy, that he's Canadian, because one of my standard jokes in a lot of speeches I give is that I'm trying to be the Canadian Michael J. Fox, but of course he is Canadian, and a lot of people don't know that. So he's already taken that role, but I always like to point it out.
Yeah. And I think somebody who's stuck with his sense of humor is Michael J. Fox. I mean, even now on his new series that he's on, I think every scene that he's in does steal it, So I think it's good.
I think we all have wonderful stories about. I mean, I think the one thing I'm just gonna do a total Davis Phinney Foundation plug here. So shameless plug. When I was first diagnosed, it was like the most amazingly horrible thing that ever happened. And for months, my family was just reeling. This was idiopathic. We had no experience in our family at all with this disease, and spent a lot of time doing the rush to, second, third consultations with other doctors. But eventually found ourselves at a Davis Phinney Foundation Victory Summit. Maybe about 7 months after my diagnosis. It was in Denver, and it was a very early on one, obviously, since I've been in the game for a long time. And we had so much fun at that conference. I mean, it was what sold me on this organization. That Victory Summit was a blast from beginning to end. We were marching around with a music guy. We were laughing. It was just a really fun day. And it helped my family. I mean, my parents were there, and it helped them relax. It was like everybody thought, by the end of the day, it was like, this is going to be okay. And I just, that feeling, the more we can laugh and the more we can say, it's going to be okay. It's really important. And I know, Chris, you mentioned earlier about, I don't know I think this was before we all got on, but about a friend of ours, Brian Reedy, is a big proponent of laugh yoga or yoga. Okay, yoga.
Brian made that yogurt too. I don't know.
Yeah, well, laughing yoga, that yogurt would be funny, but laughing yoga, where you just like make yourself laugh. And when you do it with a room full of people, we did it at an investor conference. And everybody by the end of the hour has tears streaming down their face because it's so funny. And it's a lot of fun to laugh with Brian Reedy, and it's good for your body. Laughing is really, really good medicine. So for reals. What are you watching, reading, listening that's making you laugh? Says Stephanie Johnson from Madison. That's you, Stephanie. Good question. I would love to see some people's answers in the chat.
This is a question. So some of you might be familiar with the podcast from Amy Poehler, A Good Hang. And this is a question she asks all of her guests at the end. And so I love this question. And I thought I would just toss it out because maybe we could share ideas and you book names or other podcasts or websites or and, like a couple people have put in the chat some books, but this is such a rich group of resources that maybe we could share ideas.
So I think I want to jump in real quick and just share, because I had a story about that relates to this actually. So I'll do this as fast as I can.
Yeah.
That's not true. I won't do it as fast as I can. I'll go reasonably paced. I was at Costco and I was walking, and all of a sudden I went off. So I'm walking in Costco and I'm like deeply off. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to sit on this big bag of rice or something. So I sit down on the rice and I wait for a second, and I could walk out of the store. I get out of the store. I get to the car. Takes me a while, of course. And but my tremor is acting up. So I'm sitting there for a moment, just getting settled. And then the song, I think it's called "Shake It Out," comes on the radio. It's by Florence and the Machine, and it's "Shake It Out, Shake It Out, Shake It Out, Shake It Out." And I'm not going to sing anymore for you. Don't worry. But so that song comes on, and I'm like, oh, sure, And so I like that. This is the reason. The connection here is that I like to hear songs and then think, oh, that song relates to Parkinson's for me. That one's pretty easy, but that to me was one that jumps out. But there are others. And anyway, so the end of the story is I'm pulling out of the parking spot, and then I look as I'm going out past the car. I'm going left, look over here, and the car that's next to me is a big Ford truck, and it's the Ford F-150 Tremor trim. And so all these things combined is like really deep off, funny song on the radio, Tremor trim. And I pulled into another parking spot, and I just had to laugh about it for a little while before I got back on the road, and thought that was amusing to me. But that's it. I like to find, as far as music that helps me, I like to listen to things that are not necessarily making me laugh, but that connect to Parkinson's. And then I like to make those connections in my mind. It's fun when they happen spontaneously for me.
One of my favorite songs is "I Like the Way You Move" by Outkast.
Mm-hmm.
Funny thing that I'm watching, I just binge watched a show called Film Club. It's like 6 episodes. It's off from BBC. It's fully, finishes beginning to end, and it was wonderfully fun, very funny, and a good watch. I watched it on the plane, so it probably takes you maybe 3 hours to watch. It's like watching a movie, but it's in 6 parts. It's a 6-episode series.
I may get the name wrong, but in terms of British television, I just watched a series called How to Get to Heaven from Belfast.
I like
And
the title.
It is dark. When you first start watching, you're not sure if it's a horror or a comedy, and it turns out it's both, and it's extremely well done.
Yeah.
I've gone back to the classics because I've been reading a lot of whatever books, and they keep referring to tilting at windmills, and I thought I should actually read where that originally comes from, so Don Quixote. And I'm reading it, and it's actually very funny. I mean, it's very amusing. And the other thing I'm listening to is I kept telling Siri, play my sleep music, play music for my sleep. But so for some reason, it keeps switching to Monty Python for whatever reason. So I have a series of albums from Monty Python, and the one that came on was like I Speak Chinese, and then the comfy chair. So those are the two that have been making me laugh lately.
Yeah. My life was Faulty Towers and Monty Python growing up. That was me. Yeah. But a good series with Steve Carell. If you're a fan of Steve Carell, Rooster is a new series which we've started watching, which is pretty funny.
Oh, I love Steve Carell.
He's got a great sense of humor.
Yeah, he does.
There's also Curb Your Enthusiasm. I think that's the one with Larry David, right? That has Michael J. Fox on a few episodes, which I found to be hilarious, those episodes. So those made me laugh a lot.
Well, I guess we should mention, oh shoot, what's the name of the show that he's been on?
Shrinking.
Yeah, which is a great show, even without Michael J. Fox, but it's a fun show.
Steve Carell was obviously in The Office, and the British version of The Office was Ricky Gervais. So segue to Ricky Gervais, he has a show called Afterlife, which again, dark humor.
Yeah.
Thank you for the thumbs up, Stephanie.
I love that. And that was my sister actually introduced me to that shortly after Rick died. And she was like, "Ooh, I don't know if this is too soon." But like Amy is like rocking back, but there was something cathartic for me about that topic of sort of blending grief and humor, I thought was really helpful personally. But it was a little painful, I'm not gonna lie, and a little ouchy, but it was also cathartic and helped.
Yeah. There are no taboos in the show, right? He just says what he thinks, and that's kind of nice sometimes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a playlist of all the songs that are about shaking and moving, like on Spotify. If anyone has found a playlist, I think that would be kind of fun to listen to.
We did start one. I think we can try to find it and put it out when we release the video. We made one at some point a couple years ago. I think we talked about media and on the Meetup or something, and I think we had a playlist that came out of that. Maybe it's somewhere. I'll try to find it. So, we're at the end of our hour, and I think, we should wrap up and move on to the next part of the day. But I do want to thank everybody for being here. This was a very fun conversation. Thank you, Larry, for bringing it up. And thank you, Lloyd and Amy, for joining us today. Thank you to everybody in the audience. And please, if you are going to be at WPC, come say hi. A lot of the people on the screen will be there, and other folks from the foundation will be there. And we hope to see you. If not there, we hope to see you very soon at the next meetup, which will be the 3rd Thursday of June. So thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Roy. Thanks for being here. Good to see everybody.
Still not waving.
Thanks, everybody.